Hello again, dear our podcasters. The summer is over and it's beginning to be more business-like, and we need to talk more and more about all the topics that we have covered before and everything else that we haven't covered before. This time today, we are going to talk about how to make money, but not in the way that you would actually assume. Today, we are actually going to talk about how to make email marketing for charities and nonprofit organizations. And we all know that usually those organizations don't have large budgets and they don't have a lot of team members to take care of marketing. And therefore, there are usually some people who do everything. And one of those peoples actually is John Walsh. He has joined us today for our podcast. Thank you for joining us. And he has been doing email marketing and actually all sorts of marketing for non-profit organizations for years already. And as he has also been working with pro-profit organizations, then he certainly knows all the differences between a non-profit and pro-profit organizations and marketing there. And that's why today we are mostly going to talk about non-profit organizations because I haven't done much marketing for non-profits, and probably most of you haven't also done it, but certainly there are some really good points that we can all use. So welcome, John Walsh. Thank you very much for joining us. And please feel free to introduce yourself. Where do you come from and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure. So yes, my name is John Walsh, and I am living in America, specifically North Carolina, the Charlotte, North Carolina area, so the southern part. And yeah, as you mentioned, I have experience with digital marketing and the for-profit space, which is where I started my journey. And then I moved to nonprofit organizations, and I've been doing digital marketing for nonprofits for about 6 years, specifically email marketing for 5 years. And I love email marketing. That's how I got my feet wet. It's really kind of, I mentioned my first love in digital marketing. When I went to become a nonprofit marketer, I wanted to focus on one specific area. And I focused on email marketing, and I know a lot of people who kind of say they fell into it. I'm just another of those statistics of people who didn't really come in thinking, yes, I want to be an email marketer, but I found I love it. It's such a great way to communicate with people. And so I've been working for nonprofits now for 6 years, specifically, as I said, email for 5. And then now I work doing kind of digital marketing. So back to email, social media, website, and whatnot, where I am now. And yeah, so I love it. I'm happy to talk about email marketing. There's just so much to talk about it. It's kind of a surprise to me. So thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. So I also love email marketing, and I think we love email marketing for very many different reasons. You mentioned one thing, which is that you love to communicate with people. Any other reasons why you specifically love email marketing? What's so special about the emails?
Yeah, I think email, honestly, as I said, it's a great way to communicate with people. For my generation and everything, you kind of grew up with email. It's a great way to share a lot of information with people sometimes, more so than like a text message, which you kind of, you know, it's a lot of typing, it seems like, with 2 thumbs. Maybe that's the way I type. But I think that, email, it's such a versatile medium. It's, you can have images, you can have animation, you have donate, you have call to action buttons, you have links that you can click to. It's such a versatile medium, such a versatile channel that you can just do so much with it. And it's still growing. That's the great thing about email, even though it's been around for a lot longer than, say, text messaging. There's still so much room for it to grow and to improve, and I'm excited about what's in store for email.
Okay, now a really controversial question. Probably you have heard many people say that, oh, emailing is dead and nobody's using emails anymore. So how would you reply to those people? How would you say that no, email marketing is not dead and it's growing?
Yeah, I've heard that too for years. I don't email's been dead for years,
Yes.
and yet you know, some statistics, right? So I think the big one that most people maybe are aware of is that still ROI is $38 to $40 per dollar spent on from an email. And that's a great return on investment, anywhere from $38 to $40. You know, the text messaging isn't doing that as far as I know. Social media isn't doing that as far as I know. Uh, so yeah, so that's one of them. Email isn't dead. I also have read many studies that say people prefer email as communication tool, as a way to communicate. And I'm not just talking about my generation, the older generations. I'm talking about millennials and Gen Zs that are saying they want communication through email. And that's great news, right? For email marketers like ourselves, because it is like and they're enjoying it. They like it. It's also say not instantaneous, so they can check it when they want to check it, whether that's every 5 minutes or whether it's every hour, right? They're not getting notifications, or they can choose notifications or not. So they can kind of pause it if they need to, and they're not bombarded with communications. So they can use it, read it as they want. And I think that's really why. And I don't see, as much as we talk about email is dead, other people talk about that. It's really, I don't think it is. I don't think it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. As I mentioned, it's still growing. There's still so much it can do to improve that it'll just continue to improve. And I don't see it going away at all.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that giving out useful information via email is actually a great tool, and people do want to get news or all sorts of good information on the email. Maybe they don't want to get marketing, maybe they don't want to get spamming. Usually, we don't want to get those princes from Nigeria sending us letters. This obviously is dead, but useful email campaigns, everybody actually wants to read them. And then, as you said, that you can choose the timing when you want to use this information, and it's all just in your pocket, in your phone. Just use it when you want to.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yes,
I
I
think,
totally agree.
yeah, it's great.
Yes. So, but I also love email, but I have never done emailing for nonprofits, and I'm really sure that you can teach me so much about how to do nonprofit emails as well, because I assume that the strategies are so different from pro-profit organizations. So maybe we can start by introduce me to the world of nonprofit organization and emailing. What's different there? What are the different methods that you use that maybe pro-profit organizations don't use?
Yeah, and if it's okay, I'd like to actually start with some similarities, just so we could kind of
Yes.
set a baseline. Because I think in the nonprofit world, which I come from, it's like apples and oranges between for-profit and nonprofit, and I don't think we're that far apart. And so I'm definitely going to give some differences. But if it's all right, I'd like to say, you know, there are, because it is email marketing and it is email communication, and nonprofits can learn from for-profits about great things to use, how to use email, and I think vice versa. I think for-profits can learn great things. So I just some really quick similarities, and then I'll definitely touch on differences. But you know, I think the strategies
Please.
are very similar between the two, between nonprofits and for-profits. And I think best practices for emails, best email is email. And nonprofits need to look at best practices kind of the same way that for-profits do. So I think that those, you know, and I think those are kind of the similarities, whether you're communicating for somebody to buy a product, or whether you're communicating for somebody to raise money. And as we kind of mentioned, email is a great way to communicate. It's a great way to build relationships. So some differences, to get back to your question, is I really think the motivation behind the marketing is different between for-profit and nonprofits. Really, it's a difference between buying and giving. And that comes out in different ways, whether it's through language. But really the motivation, and that's something nonprofits need to understand is that you're not asking your audience to buy a product. You're asking your audience to give. And it's a different mentality when you go into and you read an email. It's just a different mentality. It's psychologically different. And so you have to understand that. For profits, you buy something and you're getting something tangible in return, whether it's a product or a service. You can kind of define it. You can say, okay, I clicked the button, I got this thing. Whether it's a pair of jeans or whether it's a service, I got I got a coaching session, right? You can kind of point to it. With nonprofit, it's not. It's you are giving, and you're giving to a larger cause. You're helping people, and you'll see it. You can see the difference, but it's not as tangible. You know, unless you can maybe meet the person, you're not able to say this is mine. And it has a different feeling when you do it. At least it does for me, right? So when I buy something, I kind of feel good about it. This is going to be great. This is going to be practical. But then it kind of goes away, right? Until the next thing comes up, at least that I want, that I need. With nonprofit, that feeling is different, right? I think that feeling lasts longer because you know that what you're doing is bigger than yourself. And it's something that's you're more passionate about. You kind of maybe with the product, you're passionate about it in that moment. But for nonprofits, it's usually a lifelong, something that's deeply ingrained in you, or something that you're very, very passionate, want to see change, want to see better. So that's one of the things. Another kind of, I say strategy that I see different from nonprofits and for-profits is what I'm going to refer to as what I call the plain text type email. So emails that don't rely on images. I don't see many for-profits use these. I'm sure there are some. I'm sure they use it very well. Whereas in nonprofit world, we use plain text type emails. I can get into some of the technical issues, but it looks like a plain text email. So no images. It's a letter. It looks like an email that you would send to a friend or a loved one. And we use this because these emails look more personal than something that you would send a marketing email, right? A marketing email usually has a lot of images, a lot of maybe different products you can buy, a lot of stuff to see, right? And that's fine for for-profit. But with nonprofit, we really want to connect that relationship from person to person. And so we view email almost like I said, a plain text email where it's just text. And again, I kind of mentioned this already, but it looks and sounds more personal. And then when you're giving, it just feels right. It feels like, oh, I'm given to this. And so that's not to say that nonprofits don't use images. When it comes to fundraising emails, we try to focus less on images and more on the story and more on the relationship. If we're doing a newsletter or something like that, we may use more images and whatnot. But yeah, that's actually kind of one of the big differences. And we have some stats on that. I've done testing. I've know other agencies that have done testing, and plain text emails and plain text type emails perform better than overly heavy images. And I've seen anywhere from an 8% conversion increase. And if it just has a button instead of a ton of images. Yeah, we know it works. And I guess that is one of the big differences. I guess I would just say that maybe we have more tools, email tools, templates in our toolbox maybe than for-profits. I don't know.
But I was listening to you, and actually, this is so interesting because usually, if we talk about images, then images should create emotions. And I always assume that if you're doing something for nonprofit, you want to create those emotions in a person. You mentioned storytelling, but I assumed, I was wrong, but I assumed the pictures also create this storytelling. Like they create emotions in people, and that's why maybe it's better, because at least in Estonia, I am following some cat shelters stories and cat shelters emails, and they always include this picture of a sick cat, and I feel so sorry for the cat, and then I want to make the donation. But they also, like as you said, they also have the story behind it. So they use both the picture and the story. Maybe I should ask them to try and make a test as well, and do one without the picture, just the story.
Yeah, and I'd like to see that, because I do think, I know I just said images, we stay away from images. I think there is a place for images. And I'd say maybe one image is okay if it's an image of a cat or an image of a sick child. And we can get into a conversation about the difference between seeing kind of a negative effect on a person and seeing a positive effect on a person. And that would actually be an interesting test as well. Because I know that there are studies out there, I don't have stats on that, but of like, whether a child is frowning or whether a child is happy now because of the
Help.
the help. And that's interesting. So I guess what, I know I said no images. I mean, I try to say, and if the image isn't, as you said, it doesn't create emotion, then don't use the image. If the image does add to the story, then yes, go ahead, but don't make it like huge. Remember, like just I would say a thumbnail image or just a small header image, hero image is fine. But I guess what I'm trying to say, stay away from those like 4 or 5 images in an email, because those come across as very, very marketing. And so, yes, but we did, I mean, it was a plain text. I think the images that we took out weren't really beneficial. I mean, that's why it performed better, because it really didn't add to the story. It really kind of subtracted to it. So to your point, I would say if you're going to use images, if it's going to add to the story, then yes, use an image. Look at it. And if it's just kind of a static image of a far shot of a person in the background, or landscape, unless that's your thing, then yeah, maybe kind of stay away from it.
Yeah, this one I totally agree. It needs to give like some impact to the story that you are telling. Otherwise, there is no point of adding the picture.
Yeah,
that is so true.
It would be interesting to know kind of the difference between like the faces or the feelings on the image as well. I enjoy testing, I know, so that'd be fun to try.
Yes, and I also, if we continue on the topic of images, I think that the image itself also needs to be like good enough, but not overdone. For example, if you take the same example of the cat, if the cat is injured and I see like the broken bone, then I do want to help. But for some people, maybe the picture is too much. And that is also, I assume, an issue. You don't want to make it like negative emotions in a person. Yes, they will feel sorry, but if they also feel like something negative, like maybe seeing blood or something, then this is probably not good. And this will not help your email.
Yeah, I think you raise a great point. And there's a lot of controversy on that, because you'll see nonprofits who do both. I've seen the commercials of the sad dogs and the sad cats, with the sad song, and yeah. But there is something, I mean, I've also seen studies that say that people give, and people are happier when they see people who are smiling. And they can relate more with that. And so there is something to be said about that. And that's something that definitely should try. We kind of take the happy approach, just because of the psychology behind it. We're also trying not to, I say, guilt people into feeling something. Like, we want it to be a true emotion. Like if we want it to be real. And so we try not to lean too far that way. And I think the term is like called image pornography. I think that's the term. I'm not sure on that one. So, but it's that like making people feel bad, and so they're going to give. And then there's further motivation behind that, because then why are they giving? Are they giving because they feel bad, or are they giving because they care? If they're giving because they feel bad, then what's the likelihood that they'll give again?
Exactly.
And so that's where that fine line is. And that's kind of where, what I enjoy about email marketing is there's that fine line, and you have to test it. You have to see what you feel comfortable with as an organization. The other thing that you mentioned was kind of the image quality. And I kind of like to talk about that because I think there is a difference in nonprofit and for-profit, maybe. And that is to stay away from stock images in email. And it's actually, it looks better if it's, again, more realistic. So if you're just getting out your your phone camera, excuse me, and snapping a picture, that comes across, that is more realistic than if you get a whole production crew out there and get the lighting right, and right, which is maybe for profits, maybe that's what they can do, they can afford, and they want it to look that way, that polished. Nonprofits, I don't say it's gritty, but it's realistic, and that's what you want. It's okay if it's not perfectly centered. If it's okay if it's, you still want to capture, the essence, and as you said, the emotion of the image. And so, again, a difference between maybe for-profit and nonprofit is it's really important just to use real, authentic images.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if we now continue to the storytelling side, which is also so important for nonprofit organizations, how do you tell a good story? There are some key elements that you need to include, or how do you bring those emotions out in a person through a story?
Yeah, and so we know that storytelling moves people better than numbers does. So we know this again through studies. And while it's great to include numbers, sometimes to make it easier to understand, give $5 to help 5 children. That's easy to understand, but that really doesn't provide the emotion. We keep talking about emotion. It really just doesn't provide the impact and the connection that a story does. It provides a story because we don't have a tangible product that we can point to. We can point back to stories, and stories have such a great impact. You can see change, right? And that's really where the impact of a story happens. And so I talk about, all nonprofits should use stories some way through digital marketing means. And with email, it's a little different depending on the type of email you send. So if we're talking about specifically a fundraising email, I like to share the entire story. You may have to shorten it a little bit because it's an email, but what you don't want to do is tell them to click here to continue reading the story. If it's a fundraising email, you want them to get the gist of that story as they read the email, which means that you have to tell the challenge that the person or animal, or the challenge they faced. You need to talk about the actions that they took, and you need to talk about the resolution. It needs to all happen within a couple hundred words for email, right? Because we only have so much room. You don't want to make it too long, but you got to give them that entire story arc, because the idea is the story should point them to the action to donate. And so I think that's very specific for fundraising. I think when you're talking about a different type of email, if you're talking about an update email or a thank you email, or if you're even talking about a newsletter, you can give a shorter story, almost like a teaser, and then have them click to read more. And then you can send them to a web page where they can, read a 500-word, 600-word story and really kind of feel that emotion. But it's a fun challenge in my mind to put together a story and to kind of edit a story, to have all the important components to fit on an email and to move people to action. Because what you want, again, is to create that emotion. And if you skip out on the challenge and you go right to the good stuff, which I've seen nonprofits do, hey, here's Jane and she's all better now. You've lost a lot of it. You need to, it's tough, but you have to explain the challenge, what the individual is going through, so that they can connect, right? Because that's why we sit through 2-hour movies, is so that we can see people face challenges and overcome them, right? And that's where the beauty kind of the human spirit lies. So yeah, that's kind of how I would answer that.
Okay. You say that you usually send more than one email per one topic. For example, in Estonia, there are some cancer organizations who collect money or fundraise money to give out to cancer patients so that they can get better treatment. Would you share a story, like if you have already fundraised the money for somebody, would you share the story via email as well if the person has actually passed away and they didn't make it? Would that be a bad sign, or could you use this information as well to fundraise again?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because those are some tough issues, right?
Yes,
And not every story ends happily. Um,
exactly.
and that's not to put light on because these individuals. And so I do think so. I think so. And I mean, I'm actually can think of an organization that does that in America, and their child passed away from cancer, and they tell her story often. And this is like 20 years ago this happened. So I mean, I think so. I think you need to do it. I need to do it delicately. Um, I think so I guess I'm trying to say there's a right way to tell a story that doesn't have a happy ending, that
Hmm.
doesn't end well. But I think that's the reality, right? And that's why you're raising money. And I think what you would do in that case, or what I would do in that case, is I would tell the story and I would add something that says, but this doesn't need to continue to happen.
Yeah,
We don't
exactly. You
need
can
more
help
stories.
others.
Yeah, we don't need more stories like, and that's why we need you. We need you so that we don't have more stories like this. And I think, yeah, you can. It's like I said, it's just a more delicate story to tell, but I think it's
Hmm.
important to tell, and that's why they're doing it, right? I mean, you're talking about cancer, right? Because you're raising money so that it doesn't happen again, so more people don't have to go through it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, to some extent, you need to bring it to the awareness of people that this actually is happening and not everybody gets well. And that's why we need to help those people, because otherwise, if we don't help them, then actually some of them won't make it. And then that's the reality, and we need to face it.
Right. Yeah, and that's their mission, right? Their mission is probably to end cancer.
Yeah.
And the only way that they can do that is through people giving money and donating. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a beautiful way to say that.
Hmm. Now, if we think about, like, there are some, as you said, there are some different approaches to the emails. You can either scare people, you can either tell them like there's some scary stories. You can tell them some success stories. You can tell that bad things are happening in the world. Or you can tell them people are getting better. You can tell them, like, basically two different approaches. One is like a bit more negative, and the other is like really happy, happy, happy. Should you use both versions of the emails? Should you combine them? Should you maybe use, I don't know, 20% of sad emails and 80% of good emails? Or what is the good ratio of those stories and the success stories?
Yeah, I think there needs to be a combination of both. If you always go negative, people are going to just kind of give up. They're going to say,
Yes,
"Well, I
exactly.
can't do anything." If you're only telling happy stories, then they're going to say, "Well, then why do you need me?
Yeah,
Everything's good.
exactly.
I don't need that. You don't need me." So you have to find a combination. What kind of works for me? What I see work. I don't know that there's a 80-20% rule, but I guess how I approach it is so for fundraising when you're trying to get somebody to donate is you kind of look to those, as you said, maybe those negative stories, to those what I call the need. So you're trying to explain the need and the story. You're trying to show people, okay, this is what we need and this is why we need it. And so you're saying, here's the bad things that are happening. And then as kind of we talked about, and you can make a difference. And so that's kind of how I focus on fundraising emails. But then right after that, you're sending when people are donating, maybe a couple of days later, you're sending the success stories, and
Mm.
that's where you're saying, okay, look at now, we're going to take what you gave us and we're going to use it to make this better. And here is a story of someone that you helped make better. They're not going to be the same story. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you can say, It may be weeks or months later though, and that's fine. You could say, here's an individual in need, and then maybe 2 or 3 months later, depending on the organization, you could say, and now this person is in a much better place. That's possible, and it's great to do. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you have to take 2 separate stories and say, here's someone who's in need, and now here's someone who you've helped, and that's a great way to do that. I like to actually have probably like to have more success stories than I do need stories, but there's probably a good balance, just because just to show the kind of the impact that you're having, right? I think that's why I have more success stories, but that's how I use them. I use the need stories in a fundraising email, and then a success story almost everywhere else, whether it's a thank you email, whether it's kind of an update email, whether it's a newsletter, and those are great to share in emails. Yeah, and anytime, right? Like it doesn't have to be like right after the campaign. We do it as well, where I think we created a video, and it was a great video of testimonials. And we just, you know what, this is great. Let's just share this. Let's just send an email out to everyone who donated. And, you know, I would say there's no rhyme or reason, but it was just, the rhyme or reason was to cultivation and to build a relationship and to show people the impact. But there was no kind of like lead in or tie in to say, well, this was where your money went to. It was just kind of a general thing. And I think that's kind of a great way. That's how we like to approach stories.
I think it works well psychologically as well, because if you know that, yes, this money was actually needed and used for a good cause, then I feel good that I know that, yes, I helped. But because if I would get this thank you letter maybe a few months later after I donated, and this donation was actually used for the effect that I wanted it to be used, then I don't remember this anymore. But if I get this response really quickly, then my brain also still remembers that I did the donation, and this thank you feeling is so much bigger. So
yeah, I think it's very important for nonprofits we kind of use a two email approach for thank yous. So as soon as someone donates, they get an automated thank you. It has a story in it. I say it's kind of an evergreen story. And it's just, you know, again, kind of I mentioned, it's not directly related to maybe the campaign, but it's loosely related to the campaign. It's definitely related to the mission of the organization, if that makes sense. But that way they're getting that immediate gratitude, right? And I think that's very important, because I don't think more nonprofits could do that. I need to do that.
So how do you get the information out who donated and who don't? Do you need like this bank information for that, or how do you get this information?
So our automated process, it's a trigger, so that as soon as someone donates, it goes into an auto messenger. And so that's the way that they get it. And then a day or two, or maybe a week later, depending. Usually we try to do a day or two. They'll get another thank you that's a little bit more personal, that relates directly back to the campaign they gave to, a story that directly relates to the campaign they gave to. And in that regard, we have to pull using our CRM, using our database. We go into our database and pull everyone who donated, you know, in this campaign, and then we send them that thank you as well. So people who donate actually receive 2 thank yous. That's the best way that we found, because when you're sending an automated thank you, it really can't be quite as personal as you want it to be. I mean, it still may include their name, which is great, but it doesn't really connect back to maybe the campaign exactly, like the project or the person that they're giving to. So we take that kind of 2 email approach, and then sometimes we'll send another email if it's a long-term campaign. We'll send another email update if it's something like, you know, you helped build a building or create a well, right? Like that's a common thing. Like you can't see a well being built within 2 days, but it's important to send that email again, you know, and remind donors, hey, it's been a month, and we still are using your money, and here's a well that we dug, just yesterday, because of you. And so those touch points are very important. It's never too late to continue to thank to continue to thank donors.
Oh, that is so true. You probably have many donators who repeatedly do it, and there are some of them who do it maybe do it only before Christmas time, and there are some donators who maybe do it once in 5 years. Do you keep them in different segmentations? Do you approach them differently?
Yeah, we have them segmented. We know who they are, but we don't really. We keep asking them. So even if they donate once a year at Christmas time, let's say, or end of year, as we would say, and in donor speak, there's none. I have no problem emailing them up more opportunities, right? Because maybe something will trigger them, and maybe something will connect with them. And so you're missing out on opportunities if you only email them once or twice a year, based on their behavior. Now, it's great to know that they only give once or twice a year, and that's fine. That's when I would make sure that you are reaching out to them at those times a year, if they do. But people want to know what's going on, and even in a fundraising email, even if they don't give, you're still making that connection with them. They're still seeing your organization, and they're still reading those stories. And so I feel like they're more likely to continue to give, even if they only give once a year. And so we do like to donate, but I like to continue the conversation going. Even if it's, and especially non-fundraising emails, they kind of get everything. Again, for that reason of you keep them involved, you keep them kind of top of mind, right? There's nothing like receiving an email and going, who is this, or what's this organization? And now they must have signed up, right? Or maybe they gave 2 years ago. But email is a fast moving as well. And so if you're not in their consciousness kind of thing, then you're missing out on an opportunity. And you don't want to only email them once a year, because that's when they donate, because they may feel like, well, maybe next year I'll just give to someone else. And so you want to get them involved, even if they are only giving once a year, and you want to give them that opportunity to give to other, again. And we've seen that happen, right? Where somebody who gives once a year maybe gives again. That's great. Or you see someone who gave and then who gives again like the next month, and you're kind of taken aback. I've seen it happen where someone gave a big gift, and then in another month later they gave another big gift. Now, had we stopped after the first one, we wouldn't have received a second one. I kind of leave it up to the donors, right? And that's the great thing about email, is if they don't want to do it, they can either not open the email, they can open the email and read it and not take an action, but they're still connecting in some way. But I think, excuse me, to your larger question, it's important that nonprofits segment their audience, whether it's donors, their type of donors, whether it's they give once a year, whether they give once a month. You want to know if they give a couple times a month, because maybe those donors are the ones that you want to become a monthly donor. You maybe want to reach out to them and say, hey, would you like to, become a monthly donor? You're already giving this amount. You can just give this amount over a year if you like. You want to know which groups are ready for kind of an upgrade, in for-profit speak, an upsell, right? You want to say, okay, well, we've noticed you've given, $1,000 or $2,000. Maybe you can try to bump them up to become, a $3,000 donor or a $5,000 donor, right? You need to know that. You need to have those segments so that you can start crafting your emails specifically toward that segment, and not just kind of giving a broad stroke email. The other thing I think we talked about or can mention are, people who maybe attend events, right? So you want to segment those. So they're only receiving emails about events that they're attending, or volunteers, right? Have those segments. You just need those segments. You need to know who they are. And then when you craft a message, know who you're crafting it for, whether it's for this segment or whether it's for the larger audience.
Exactly. You need to give attention to the segment, and you need to have the same wording that they understand and have the message that will actually get through to them. So yeah, segmentation it's important in every sector, not just non-profit or pro-profit. Everywhere it's important.
Oh, yeah.
Totally agree to that.
Yeah. Yeah, and more profits need to do some more segmenting. It's so you can get so specific with segments, but it's so much more personal, and you can craft an email and draw attention to something like, we know you have, love cats, or we know that you love dogs, right? And if you know that, you can actually say that instead of, we know that you love animals.
Yes.
It's so much more specific, and you connect with them, right? That's personalization right there.
Exactly. In non-profits, you probably the loyal clients or the loyal customers are the ones that you really want to get a lot. So how do you keep the loyalty? How do you build the loyalty among your customers? Usually you tell customers, but how do you actually call them? They are not customers in
Yeah, so I call them supporters. I have a distinction. So supporters are people in my mind who either donate, or maybe they open an email, or maybe they volunteer. So I kind of say supporters as a broad term, and then I segment it down into donors, who are specifically who give money. But in my opinion, like, supporters are people who can open up an email and read it and interact, or maybe attend an event, but they've never given. So I use supporters. And I think, the way you do that is through relationships, right? And I think nonprofits really need to focus on email as a relationship, a way to build relationships, a way to build trust. As we talked about at the beginning, right? Email is communication. It's not a one-way form of communication. It's two-way, right? I mean, there is a reply button. They can reply, and you actually want them to encourage them to reply in some cases, right? So that they understand that there is somebody behind that email, maybe who's reading your questions or reading your concerns and getting back to you. But I think that's one of the great ways is to build relationships. And I think we kind of talked about the plain text emails, where that's kind of a neat way to do that, because it does come across as a little more personal. And then you can say, hey, do you have a concern? Reply, and we'll get back to you. Again, another
do they actually reply? Like, how many people actually reply? Because I assume the number is times bigger than in pro-profit organizations, where people usually don't reply.
Yeah, I mean, we do have people reply. If you ask them a specific question, not like in a survey, but if you say, so I work for a Christian organization, it's something like, how can we pray for you? And people will reply. I mean, it's amazing how many will. But and even where I'm at now, we still have people who we have it set up so that we have a feedback loop and an inbox set up, so that if somebody replies to any email, we see that reply. And whether it's things like, we didn't get the recording, or will we get a recording? If we're doing an event, will we get a recording? No matter how many times you say you'll get a recording, there's still people who want to know if they'll get a recording. And and so we reply. Like, it's a great way to kind of start a conversation, and again, to build relationships with people. So it does happen, probably a little bit more frequently than I would have expected when I first got into nonprofit work. Maybe not as common as for profit, but it does happen, because people want to know that there's somebody on the other end. And it is a reply tool, right? And so it's a good point to make, depending on your email platform and your database. As a nonprofit, you want to make sure that feedback loop does work, because you will get comments, questions, and it's important to respond. I think it's important to send non-fundraising emails. You want to get back to your 80-20-20 rule, there's a great 80-20 rule. You need to probably send 80% non-fundraising emails and 20% fundraising emails. Always send more non-fundraising. And we talked about stories, and that's a great way to send non-fundraising email, whether it's a success story or an update. Newsletters, you can send newsletters, you can send events, things that are happening. It just kind of keep, as I said, keep your organization top of mind with them. You don't have to be pushy and send them multiple emails in a day. But I think nonprofits in general don't go that route. They actually go the opposite end, which is I'm only going to send maybe once a month, and I'm only going to send a fundraising email. Or I'm only going to send fundraising emails, and I'm going to send 5 fundraising emails today, and then I'm never going to send another email again. And that's not a good approach to email fundraising and email communication. So I would say, you're probably already, the organizations are probably already doing, articles on their website. They're probably putting stuff out there on social media. It's not much harder to add, to take those articles and put them in a newsletter. Even if it's just one, it doesn't have to be a full length 4, 5, 6 article newsletter. It can just be one. Here's what's happening, or even just updates. These are projects these are ongoing projects. So it's important when you're talking and building relationships with supporters to just keep them involved.
Yes, I think people who actually do fundraising and who actually are interested in everything, not just fundraising, but also the volunteer work and everything else, they do have this special feeling of having a mission. And I think that this is something that might unite those people because they all want to contribute. They all want to change the world into a better place. And it seems to me at least that maybe those people also read those emails differently. They see the emails differently because they do want to know what's happening, and they do want to help, and they have this sense of having a mission inside of them. And I think this is already something that makes this audience so special, and maybe that's why they also reply and respond a bit differently and maybe even a bit better, because they have this one common goal. And that's why I'm interested in how do you get new subscribers to the list, because you don't want to get just anybody on the list. You do want to have those same people who have this feeling of having a mission. How do you find those people?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're right. They all have the same passion, right? And it's like a great community of people who share the singular purpose. And so there's a couple ways to approach a lead generation and getting new supporters. And one of the best ways that I can do is we talk about providing value, and what can you do, and how can you provide value to people, to supporters, and to new supporter acquisition. I guess the term we would use. Specifically, we use a lot of kind of taking a page really from for-profit. This is again how they kind of match up, right? Like if you were a for-profit, I'm thinking you would create maybe like a guide or an ebook, and you would say, here are the top 10 digital marketing email strategies. Sign up. Well, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to focus on the mission, and we're going to focus on the value that it provides the supporter, and say something like, again, you can use an ebook, you can use a guide, but make sure it's valuable to the supporter, that it connects with them. It connects to the mission and the supporter, right? So it's their interest and the person. So I'm thinking we went back, you talked about pets. You could talk about here are ways to house train a dog. Here are 10 ways to house train a dog, right? You're already an expert on animal care. You probably already know this stuff. You put together a book. You could put together a video. You could put together a workshop, really. I mean, you could do it any way, right? But you're creating something tangible, and then you can send that out there. You can send that out through social media. You can send it out through social media ads. You can do digital ads, right? And that's how you grab people in social media. Actually, both digitals, right? You can define your audience a little more specifically. So people who are interested in animals, maybe people who are interested in dogs in this case. And that's really the way we go about getting new subscribers or new supporters, is one through digital acquisition and through creating these value products, really. Going back and forth. And then another way, I guess, is through your board, right? So you're going to be talking to your board members, making connections that way. You're going to be talking to other people. Your volunteers are usually a great resource for finding new supporters, right? Because they're talking to their friends. Peer-to-peer fundraising is another way that's a little trickier, because in that case they're supporting maybe their friend and maybe not supporting your mission. They're kind of doing it, through a couple degrees of separation, but it's possible, right? If they have the same, if their friends have the same values as your organization and mission, then it's a great connection. So there's lots of different ways.
Yes, I think like through the volunteers, actually it does make a lot of sense, because the friends, then they see what you're doing, and it somehow feels so much more realistic. If somebody on the street comes towards me and say, "Hey, give me $10 to give to the shelter," then I'm like, "Yeah, but why?" But if a friend tells me that, then obviously I say, "Yes, here's 20." Because I know what you're doing and I know it's worth so much.
Right. And if it's important to your friend, right, it's
yes.
It's important. So that's a great point. And there's lots of different ways nonprofits can reach new audiences, and audiences that connect with their mission specifically.
Okay, we have talked so much, and it has been so interesting, and I think I can't ask you all the questions that I planned to ask you, but I do want to ask you one more thing. Can you share some success stories or some success emails that you have seen that have worked really well, and how did you make those success stories happening? What did you do to make them happen?
Yeah. So one of the things in the nonprofit world is, as the first, I would say, one of the ways to make them successful is to make sure you have a plan. I did read another stat just recently that 60% of nonprofits don't have an email marketing plan. And that's kind of sad. So, right, the only way, if you want success, you need to start with having a plan, knowing your goals, knowing your objectives, knowing your segments, knowing your channels, knowing the types of emails that you're going to send, the days you're going to send them. So please start with a plan. We talked about.
What do you have in one plan? Do you have a goal where you want to get to, or do you have like an actual plan, like when something is going to happen, or do you have everything planned out?
I have everything planned out. So I have a goal.
Oh,
I may
really?
say something like, in this case, we want to raise X amount of money, or for this campaign, maybe it's not about money. Maybe it's about engagement. Maybe we want to get, this many clicks or this much traffic. Most of the time it's money. But and then we have, kind of sub or objectives, we maybe want to increase the open rate. Maybe we want to increase the click rate, which will all lead again to the large goal. And that includes, okay, so that's our goal. What kind of emails are we going to send? Okay, we'll send, maybe some events, maybe we'll send some success stories, maybe we'll send some fundraising emails. Okay, now when do we want to send them? All right. And then you kind of map it out so that you're not kind of last minute, oh man, this happens a lot. Oh man, you know what? We haven't talked to our email audience in 2 months. We should send them an email. Okay, what do you want to send it about? I don't know. I'll get back to you. And then,
hope
then
for the magic to happen.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, you got to get this email out in the next 20 minutes. Go. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. So have that plan. Know the content you're going to do. So that way you can, if you don't have the content, you can get the content, right? Like, oh, it'd be great to have a video. Okay, but we don't have a video. So let me talk to somebody who can get a video, or let me talk to a volunteer maybe who can get a video, or maybe a board member is going to be at something and they can do something. You know what I mean? So that you can get these things planned out. And again, it's not last minute rush, and then kind of a subpar pain. So I'd say plan. We talked about stories. We talked about value. We talked about segmentation. So I guess I have kind of two that I can think of really quick, and one of them we kind of already mentioned, which was an ebook, right? So having a guide, having something of value, and giving it to them as as a gift, really, to them. I've seen that work very well, as long as it connects again to your mission and to what's important and interest to them. And you don't even have to actually ask for money, like directly. You can just say, here this is, and then maybe have a landing page that it has a form on it that asks for money, if that makes sense. So the email doesn't need to be money driven, but the landing page does. And I've seen that work very well, and gets people engaged. Another one that I've seen that I was a part of is a couple of years ago, is an email campaign. It did happen pretty last minute, but anytime you work with disaster relief or anything that's kind of in the news that's current is a great time to raise money. And so I was part of a campaign. Some tornadoes hit, and we were responding, right? So we were getting people out there to help build houses or help reach people and reach families, right? And so I would say that if you can find urgency, if there's urgency already there, don't create false sense of urgency, but campaigns that have an urgency around them, those perform very well. And that email did very well. It raised a lot of money, but I mean, I would say, like, in that case, it was mostly because of timing. And going back to plans, it's always good to have those kind of plans kind of in place, especially if you work for that type of organization, an organization that maybe responds very quickly to natural disasters or to something like that. You need to have everything in place and ready to go. You need to know, like, you need to kind of have email templates. You need to be thinking about and kind of segmentation already ready at least in your mind or written down. That way, the reason I think it was so successful is because all we had to do was add the content to the email, and we sent it out, and it went out very quickly. With disaster relief, if you're waiting 2 to 3 days after the fact, it might be too late. Or the impact may not be as much, which I've seen happen before, where we've waited a couple days and we didn't have the same impact, because it's not pressing. So those are a couple.
It's not that newsworthy anymore as well.
And that's what we used to say. It's not newsworthy. We used to say the news cycle, because I worked with a boss who used to be in the newsroom, and he kept good track of, like, how long a news cycle would last. And if it was going out of the news, we would try to get it out quickly. And if it was already out of the news, we wouldn't send it, because in those cases, and those are rare, specific, to certain organizations, that's very important. But I think you can create a sense of urgency. Giving Tuesday, end of year, those are other times when campaigns are successful, because they kind of have a sense of urgency built into them. With, like, end of year, a lot of donors give at the end of the year, and a lot of them give for tax reasons. At least in America, that's how it works. There's a whole batch of tax benefits, and they have to get it in by December 31st if they want tax benefits for that year. So, but it's important to consider, because a lot of people give at the end of the year. So, yeah, have a plan and tell stories, provide value, and then and urgency.
Yes. Yes, I totally get it, and I see that. Timing, usually in emails, it is about the timing and the message and the right person that you approach, and you need to do it correctly to get the result. And when you know what to send and when to send, then this is a good thing. This is what you should be doing.
Yeah, I think to relate it to, like, Black Friday, right? I mean, I'm sure Black Friday, even if people send a day before or 2 days before, I'm sure they don't get the same kind of response to do on Black Friday. And that's fine, right? So you have to use it to your advantage.
Exactly. Okay, my last question to you. Give me 3 things that everybody in email marketing should be doing. 3 essential things that everybody should be doing.
Yes. Okay. I'll try to give you, well, we talked about a few of them.
You can repeat them.
Okay, is that
Yeah.
all right? Well, I did talk about having a plan, so we'll start with having a plan. So let's
Mm-hmm.
please start with that, people. And then one of the things I didn't mention that I would like to mention is cleaning your lists. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Nonprofits are maybe seen as, some nonprofits are not very good at this, and it's important. They kind of go by the mentality bigger is better, and that's not the case with email, as we know. Engagement is better, and so I would encourage nonprofits in particular. I mean, anybody for profits need to do this as well, but nonprofits, clean your lists at least once a year. Remove anyone or stop emailing anyone consistently who hasn't opened an email in at least a year. That works. What I found works well for nonprofits. I like to remind people that just because you stop emailing them doesn't mean that you've removed them or deleted them from your database. You should still, on occasion, try to re-engage them with maybe a re-engagement campaign. Maybe we just were talking about some timely emails from urgency. That might be a time to re-engage them. So it doesn't, just because you remove them or clean your list doesn't mean they're gone forever. I like to make that distinction because I feel like they're like, oh no, they're gone, and it's not true. They're there. You just have to be more strategic about it, and then that can go back to point one, which is have a plan. And so maybe you have a plan for how to re-engage those people that you're not communicating with regularly. And then three, as I would say, it's really important for nonprofits. As I mentioned before, it's really important to build relationships through email. I said it, I'll say it again. It's a two-way street, two-way communication, and that includes personalization, segmentation. Yeah,
And
it's
feedback.
what's that?
And you also mentioned the feedback loop. I think this is also really important.
Yeah, and
Yes.
the feedback loop, right? I think in the nonprofit world, it's very important. It's really very important to create relationships because they are giving money out of the goodness of their heart.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting much, but a feeling better. They're not getting something in return. So it's really important that you create that and build that trust, that credibility, and that relationship with donors and supporters, I should say, and not to just do it once or twice a year, but to do it often. I tell people, honestly, it's okay as a nonprofit to email once a week as long as you're providing value to them. I don't really think they're not going to get mad. Maybe one, but most of them, they really want to hear from you and they want to know what you're doing because they really care. They really do care, and I think that's important.
That is so true. Thank you. I usually also try to tell at least three things that I learned from you. I have many things that I learned from you. It's really actually even difficult to choose just three, but definitely one thing that many email marketers maybe don't think much about psychological side of how the people are reacting to the emails, but you mentioned many things about the psychological side as well, and maybe those are the things that I would like to point out as well. First of all, is that do not guilt people into anything with your emails. In pro-profit world, you shouldn't guilt people into buying products, but in non-profit, you shouldn't guilt people into donations because they will feel bad and they will leave your list. This is a really good thing to think about in every sector, I would say. Don't guilt people; it will just create a bad feeling for people. So yeah, this was a really good point that you said out. Then secondly, you told that stay away from stock images. I think this is not only for nonprofits. I think it actually works for everywhere because we see those beautiful pictures everywhere. We all know these are not true. And if we see an actual thing, then we relate so much more with that. So if needed, if you want to show the real side of something, then use the real pictures. For fashion, I understand stock pictures are good, but for real things, use real pictures. And the third thing that I would also like to point out is that you mentioned that you send those thank you letters really, really quickly after the donation. And I think that this is also a really good psychological thing to do, because if you give this dopamine to the person who gave you the donation, then the feedback loop is so quick And in a person's mind, they remember what they did and they get this thank you so quickly and they know what it's for. And for me, it sounded like so perfect and so brilliant thing to do, that thank you people, thank everybody who gave you the donation, give you this personal thank you. And that this is already so good, because we all want to be thanked. We all want to know that this money went to the right place, and I see that it actually worked. So these are those three things that I see that you are doing so well, the psychological things in a person's mind that everybody should be doing, but only I see that nonprofits tend to do it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, those are very important.
Yes. So yeah, once again, thank you very much. It was the hour went by so fast. I looked at the clock and it seemed like we have been only talking for 15 minutes, but it has been an hour already. So thank you very much for joining. And I do hope that we can talk again sometime in the future, because I think there are many, many more things that we can discuss with you in the future as well.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And anytime you want to talk nonprofit email, I always enjoy it. But thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And all the listeners of the podcast, thank you very much for listening as well. I hope you all learned something new, and see you again next time. Ciao, ciao.